It is open class number 117. Super excited to have you here. Hope you'll find a lot of value in this episode. We will jump right into 4 messages that we will talk about today. And as always, nothing is medical advice here, just general thoughts, general comments that I hope will be helpful to everyone in the community. So with that said, let us jump right in. Actually, as I'm opening this, I want to share that I got this email today from somebody at like Penguin, like Random House, Penguin, the publisher, and they were asking if I want to collaborate about, on a book about like sleep and children, which was really cool, which I'm not interested in because I'm actually writing a book for parents of when parents that are involved in the struggle with sleep when their kids are struggling, right? But I think, the idea for the book they had in mind was very different from my philosophy, but it was still very cool to get that email. Anyway, let's jump in here and look at some message here. The first one is from Liliana. Let's read this. Hi, Daniel. I don't know if you remember me, but a couple weeks ago, I commented on your video saying how thankful I am for your teaching and how much it has helped me. I do remember that. My insomnia started from a panic attack at night and trying to force myself to sleep for work in the early morning. I then went on leave for work because my doctor suggested it, and he tried to put me on medication. I would never take them as I know I don't want to become dependent on them. After a couple of weeks of struggle, I was still not working, and I found your channel. It helped immensely to understand why I wasn't sleeping and the process of sleep. I was nervous to return to work. I commented on a couple of your videos, and you helped me encourage me. I was back at work and back on track. Now the problem is I went on a 2-week vacation, and now I have to go back to work, and I feel the same anxiety building, and I even called off the last 2 days. I feel disappointed in myself. I have hyper-awareness and anxiety all over again. I have to be up for work by 6 a.m. Please help. I don't want to stick myself in a hole again. The day I don't work, I sleep fine, by the way. P.S. Sorry for the long message. This was not a long message at all, actually. A very succinct, brief message. And I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to reply here. And, Liliana, I want to say that right off the bat, I want to say I actually comment on what I think is the most important, which was like, I feel disappointed in myself. Because I think probably if I had to pick like the most common like thing that gets us stuck is that when we are critical of ourselves, we berate ourselves, we are hard on ourselves, we think we did something wrong, we think we failed, we think we just couldn't do it, we can't get it right, and things of that nature. And the reason that this is particularly like, it doesn't make any sense actually at all when it comes to sleep. Like maybe you can be hard on yourself when you didn't take out the trash. Like, dang it, I have to take out the trash. I forgot again. Like maybe you could have created a calendar or something like a reminder. You could have done that. Perhaps you had some more control over that. So maybe to some degree you can be hard on yourself for something like that. But when it comes to sleep, it literally doesn't make any sense because of the following. Like making yourself sleep is just as possible as making yourself have hiccups, right? Or turn your head blue. Turn your hair blue. Like it's just as possible to control your thoughts, your emotions, or make yourself sleep as it is to make yourself have hiccups. And imagine if you told someone like, I've been trying to make myself have hiccups for like 5 days and I can't do it. And you're like so hard on yourself, like, dang it, like I can't. And of course the confusion comes from this idea that other people can do it, but I can't, and I fail, and blah, 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 blah. So, but it doesn't make any sense. There is absolutely no way to control that. Nobody has the control of that. There's this total illusion if you think other people have control of that. So I think the most important here is like, when you feel disappointed, just remind yourself that you're hard on yourself for something that you absolutely had no control over. It's kind of like if you were hard on yourself for not being able to turn your hair blue. It just makes just as much logical sense. And then it starts looking kind of ridiculous. Like, why am I so hard on myself? It doesn't make any sense. And then that can translate really into self-kindness when you're like, you talk to yourself as you would a friend in that situation, like, just kind of give yourself a hug, be like, it's all right, it's going to be okay, give some, do something nice for yourself. But particularly after a sleepless night, I think it really helps to kind of like go to the spa, have some ice cream, like be super kind to yourself, teach yourself that that even after a sleepless night, something nice can happen, and you can always be gentle and kind to yourself. That's a real nice path to peace. All right, now getting a little bit more practical here, we can see that Liliana struggled a lot with sleep. There was, and it was, I think I'm reading between the lines here that there was a lot of fear of like, if I don't sleep, I won't be able to do my work. Work was a big factor, which is super, super common. And now, however, when there was clarity, when Liliana understood, like, okay, I understand why I've been pressuring myself, been trying to sleep, and that's why I have so much struggle. And Liliana kind of backed away from the struggle, abandoned the struggle, which is the same thing as saying she became more okay with uncertainty, more okay with being awake at night. She kind of let things be, let go of control, then sleep happened easier. So a very, very common story. Now, of course, when kind of like the original trigger, which was work to some degree, right, has not been on the radar for a while. There was vacation, everything's fine. Liliana was sleeping well, but guess what? She has to return to work. And then obviously, like, we can see that the thought pattern that was there before, what if I can't sleep? What if they notice at work? What if I get fired? Things of that nature. The pressure builds again, and there's some more struggle. Super, super normal, super common. And now the question, of course, becomes, how do you meet this? Well, I think one way is to see that, what happened, before when I was sleeping well was that I was actually more willing to be awake. I was not trying to control sleep. And you can just know that that's always the path that always leads to sleeping well. And some other specific things when it comes to work is that, so often somebody decides not to go to work because there's a fear of like, what if I make a mistake? What if people notice? Like, it's if you think about it, many of us have gone to work after a completely sleepless night. Like, we were up, we decided to pull an all-nighter because we had so much fun with our friends, and when we went to school or work or something, like literally after not sleeping a minute, and we did just fine. Because of why did we do just fine then? Because there was no judgment, no criticism, no like berating yourself, right? So you can actually do quite well after zero sleep if there's not that heavy self-criticism, So knowing that, how much we sleep often doesn't really have that much impact on our work. It's how much we criticize ourselves. And so when you know that can really be like, okay, I haven't slept much at all, but I can still go to work. And you wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of people on this channel will find that you go to work after not sleeping much at all, and people don't even notice, right? People don't even notice. And you can see that, whoa, I can do okay, even if I haven't slept much at all. And then there's much less pressure to sleep, And when there's that less pressure to sleep, things just become easier and easier. So I think that's a really big one when it comes to work, seeing that you can do really well, even if you haven't slept much. And it's really the self-criticism that leads to that brain fog, feeling, you feel nauseous, you feel ill, you feel like, anxious, you feel sad, you feel distressed, you feel hopeless. That comes from that self-criticism, which we talked about earlier, doesn't really make any sense. So I think, yes, very, very important here to note that, of course, there's some anxiety when kind of the trigger is back, so to speak. And we talked about some things that can really help when it's kind of like work-related stress. And then, like, when you call in sick, let's say, it's true that, of course, when you call in sick, that can make it seem like you can't work. It's sort of like whenever you do something to avoid something stressful or painful or something that's uncomfortable, it sort of teaches the brain that there is something to avoid. You should avoid it. You should be careful. You shouldn't, put yourself in this situation where you might have discomfort, which makes you even more scared of having discomfort, and then even more likely to avoid things. And this is tricky, of course. So it's always good to keep that in mind. At the same time, if you did call in sick, maybe that's just what you needed that time. Always be kind to yourself. Maybe you needed some time away from work. But generally speaking, it usually always helps to do things, even if it's scary, show yourself that you can do it, even if it's even if you don't think you can. So I hope this helped, Liliana, and just stay in touch. Let us know how things go, and hope this made a lot of sense to you. Okay, we have a live comment here from Sean. Well, I'm the only one here. I know people are awake. I think there's actually 5 people that are on live with us right now, Sean. So you're not alone. Okay, let's take a look at our next message. Next one comes from Jesse, who was actually my client in BedTyme, and I had a really nice time working with Jesse. So let's read this. Jesse says, "Hello, Mr. Erickson. I hope you're doing well. I am. Thanks for asking. I have been recently having issues with sleep again, but this speed bump has now stretched out for the past 3 days. I've had a very big amount of trouble falling asleep, to the point where I may manage to sleep very little, about 1 to 2 hours, if that. I had completed your BedTyme course a while back and was practically insomnia free, but I recently seen it come back ever since getting allergies and having an extremely sore throat. What I'm wondering is why I can be using my phone in bed and catch myself falling asleep while watching YouTube, but the instant I put my phone down and decide that's my sign to sleep, I wake right back up and have trouble falling asleep. Anything helps. Thanks and kind regards, Jesse." Jesse, it's really, I mean, I'm sorry, of course, to hear about the struggle, but really nice to hear back from you. And, it's very, very typical, normal, nothing strange with having this, like, you've seen things very clearly, you abandon the struggle, just like Liliana, and then something happens, something with your health, allergies, sore throat, and somehow there's a little bit of fear of, like, maybe subconsciously, like, oh, what if this sore throat, this allergies I have, what if that affects my sleep? What if that makes me not sleep tonight? And then those old thought patterns that had been lying dormant for a while were kind of fading away. They kind of become a little reactivated, and the brain starts to protect you again. It goes into kind of safety mode, and it's like, what if you can't sleep? We should maybe do that. Maybe I should do this. Maybe think of this. Like, and then there's some more trouble sleeping. Nothing strange or usual at all. And it's just a little reactivation of, like, those old thought patterns. Now, what helps, again, like we talked with Liliana, is just recognizing that what always leads to sleeping well is being willing to be awake, being kind of like okay with uncertainty, and not trying to sleep. But I think what can help here really is, like, going into detail on this, what I call the Houdini effect. The Houdini effect. It's in the playlist called "This Is Natto." There's an episode about the Houdini effect, because it's so common, and it's just like that. It's like, I'm in the couch watching TV and I literally cannot keep my eyes open, but the minute I go to my bed, I'm wide awake. Or, I'm in bed watching some YouTube and I think, okay, this is time to sleep. And then the moment I decide it's time to sleep, I'm wide awake. What's up with that? And I call it the Houdini effect because it seems like sleepiness, that sleepy feeling, just vanished, right? Like the famous Houdini. So now, how can we explain this? Well, Coach Michael, who was often on the channel in the past, I hope he'll come back again and do some episodes, but he said this really, really insightful thing, which is like the Houdini effect, it just means that your brain is working just fine. It's just a sign that you have kind of a normal working brain. And what did he mean by that? Well, it's the following. So when the brain thinks that there's a threat or a problem, it should alert you to that and keep you awake. So for example, let's say you're in your bed, you're watching some YouTube, and you're just about to fall asleep, and then you remember you left the oven on. The oven is literally on, and that is dangerous. So the moment you remember the oven is on, boom, you're wide awake, you're alert, you're ready. Like, you're ready to go up and turn it off and make sure everything is safe, right? Totally normal. The brain is doing exactly what it should do. But what happens with insomnia is that there's a little confusion in the brain. The brain has started to believe that being awake at night, to be specific, is dangerous. It's a danger, it's a threat, it's something problematic, something it has to do something about. So the moment, when you're watching YouTube, then you're actually totally fine with being awake. Being awake is not a threat, it's totally fine. And therefore, because there's no threat, you can easily start falling asleep. But then just the moment you're like, now it's time to sleep, then this thought pops up, what if I can't sleep? Which is another way of saying, like, what if I'm attacked by this threat called wakefulness? And then boom, you're wide awake. The brain literally wakes you up to keep you safe from being awake, right? And it can seem really strange and mysterious, but it's again, a sign that the brain's working completely in a completely normal way, but it's a little confused. And I think this is it. Like when you see that, when you're about to fall asleep, you're like feeling sleepy, you turn off YouTube and you're like, wide awake. Then you're like, this is that Houdini effect Daniel talks about. It's totally normal. It's the Houdini effect. Okay. And then when you see it like that, there's nothing strange, unusual going on, and you can watch some more YouTube, or you might just feel sleepy again, or something like that. So I think that was the key one here, Jesse. And yeah, just stay in touch and let us know how things go. And but again, these speed bumps are so typical and normal. And when you get past the speed bump, you know, then you're less afraid of one, and then they happen less and less frequently, and everything gets easier after that. So 100%. All right, Jesse, thanks so much, and stay in touch, okay? Okay, let's read this one from James. Hi, Daniel. Thank you for taking the time to read this anytime. I always used to be a very good sleeper, falling asleep right away and waking up at the right time in the morning. I've had mild nighttime anxiety for about 5 years now since a bad experience at night time, but would still sleep okay. Over the last year, it has escalated into somniphobia, where I'd normally get 2 to 3 good nights and 1 to 2 bad nights. The last month has been really bad, where I'm barely sleeping, and I'm now in a cycle of being scared to fall asleep and worrying that the lack of sleep is harming my health, which makes me even more fearful of dying if I fall asleep. Do you have any advice? And do you think a lot of this would ease if I dealt with the original experience 5 years ago? Again, thanks for taking the time to read this. Anytime, James. And, you know, there was a couple of things that came to mind as I was reading this. The first one is I used to be a very good sleeper. This is actually confusion, you know, because sleeping is just like breathing. It's a completely like passive process. Of course, we can take control over breathing. You can say, now I'm going to take 5 breaths. But normally, right, it's a passive process. And, you know, when you sort of take control of breathing, it's, you know, it doesn't really, not much happens, right? But if you start to take control of sleeping, then things get quite tricky. But anyway, that was a little sidetrack. The point here is that you wouldn't really think of anyone as a good breather. Like, oh my gosh, that person is such a good breather. They're just breathing, you know. It's not, they're completely passive. And same thing with sleeping. It's not really that you can be a good sleeper or a bad sleeper. You just sleep, right? But when you've slept with no struggle, sleep has just happened for a long time, and then you start having the struggle with sleep, then the brain goes into this problem-solving mode, and it goes like, what's going on? I gotta figure this out. And it goes like, what was I doing before? I used to be able to make my mind kind of blank, or I used to think about this thing. I used to just think about this, and then I'd fall asleep. I used to be able to do that. And then, you know, you kind of maybe try like, oh, I'm going to do exactly what I did before. I'm going to make my mind blank, but you don't sleep. It's like, oh no, something is wrong. I used to have this under control. I was a good sleeper. Now I'm not a good sleeper anymore. Something has changed, but nothing has changed except there's now an idea that you're now not a good sleeper and you were a good sleeper before. But there is really no such thing as a good or bad sleeper. Sleep is just completely passive. And the important thing there is, of course, that when you think there's something wrong with you and you've lost something you had before, then there can be some struggle. But when you see that that's not the case, you're just the same person on the same planet, nothing has changed except the same confusion we talked about before, which the idea that not sleeping is somehow dangerous and a threat and a problem, and the brain is trying to fight this. That's where insomnia comes from. Now, that was number one. Number two was the priming thing. So this is very common. I often have clients who say like, so I ask like, oh, so how long have you had insomnia? They're like, oh, 2 weeks. And I'm like, 2 weeks? So that's not so much. Maybe you don't even need to be in this program. Maybe you should just like do read this. But then they're like, oh no, I've had on and off trouble for 5 years, and now it's really gotten bad. And so what's happening here is what I call priming, which is that let's say 5 years ago in this example, there was some type of event related to sleep that triggers some worry, like some thoughts of like, what if I can't sleep, etc. Right? So in other words, on the safety radar in the brain, you know, not sleeping was sort of in the periphery. It was kind of like a little threat, but not a big threat. So doing things like maybe taking some supplements, or like just taking a walk, being extra physically active, or whatever it is, it was enough to make the brain feel safe. It kind of like pushed it out of the radar. If you just did a little thing, you felt like you could sort of manage sleep. You had it somehow under control, right? And then something happens 5 years later, which is kind of more stressful. It may not be like actually any like outside circumstance. It should actually just be like these thoughts that have been going on for 5 years have becoming more entrenched. But anyway, at 5 years later, there's like now kind of more full-blown insomnia, which really is due to the priming. Because for 5 years, this idea that there is some problem with sleep, maybe I can't really sleep well, but I've managed, and in the act of like trying to manage it, trying to keep it under check. Whenever we try to manage in sleep or insomnia, it kind of teaches the brain that there's something that should be managed, that we need to have control over. And this is priming. Like as this goes on over the years, it kind of like really entrenches the idea that there's something wrong with my sleep, there's something wrong with me, sometimes I can't sleep, something like that. So when there is some stress or just randomly, this priming can kind of like create full-blown insomnia, more trouble sleeping. And we often have somniphobia. Somniphobia is quite common, and it is that fear of the process of falling asleep or sleeping in itself, which sounds kind of like, can you have insomnia and somniphobia at the same time? You absolutely can. It's actually not uncommon at all. And it's again because when the brain is in the safety mode, all kinds of things can appear as threats. It can be like, having tics. Oh my God, that's a problem. Something's wrong with me. Or like, I'm not hungry. Why am I not hungry? That can appear as a problem. Or like, what should I say? I'm not sleepy during the day. I didn't sleep at night, but I'm not sleepy during the day. Something must really be wrong. That can appear as a threat. Or the opposite, like I feel super sleepy during the day. That must be wrong. Like anything can appear as a threat when the brain is in the safety mode. And so the process of falling asleep and sleeping in itself, that unconscious state of sleep, can appear as threats, and we call this somniphobia. But I think the key thing is to note that nothing of this is strange or unusual. And like with any fear, it is when you try to like combat the emotion of fear, you're like, when you think that the signal, and fear is just a signal from the brain, when you want to push that signal away, you don't want to hear the signal, then it becomes quite strong, right? But when you're like, okay, I feel fear, and I understand that this is kind of like just a confusion in my brain, like my brain thinks that being asleep or not sleeping could somehow be dangerous. I understand why I have this fear, then you're no longer trying to push it away, and the somniphobia kind of fades, the insomnia fades, everything fades when you're willing to hear those signals. And signals can be like anxiety, it can be fear, it can be sadness, it can be physical things, it can be like jerks or twitches or, fast heart rate, something like that. When you are willing to like listen to those signals and be present for them, then the brain's like, oh, this person is hearing these warning signals, so I probably don't need to warn them more. So the second idea here was like the priming. And we also talked about like somniphobia as a fear and how to meet fear. And I felt there was another things to comment on here from James. Okay, we talked about the priming. Last month has been really bad. I'm worried that the lack of sleep is harming my health. I can just share, that there's no evidence whatsoever that little sleep or insomnia causes any health problems. And so, the final one. Do you think that this would ease if I dealt with the original experience 5 years ago? My thinking there is that the past really has no power over us. Like the only time that exists is the present, the now, and that will never ever change, right? The past is just it just exists in our thinking now, today, and the future just exists in our thinking now. The past and the future are really just illusions; they don't exist. And so, I think, generally speaking, that when we go back and say like that thing that happened 5 years ago, that's why I can't sleep, and now I have to deal with that. That's impossible because it's just a memory, it's just an idea, right? And I think trying to go back and like modify something that you can't control, which is the past, that just typically leads to more struggle. So I think To me, I think it's more helpful to just understand what's happening now and know that the past really has no impact over the future. And I think that can be really liberating. That's my thought on this. Darren is with us live, says I need help. Darren, you know, you come to the right place if this is like sleep related. You know, just spend time, you know, browsing the playlists, comment, you know, send questions to open class, and like the community here is very supportive, and I really hope that you'll find things that can really help you here, Darren. All right, so last question from Esther here. Let's read this. Esther says, can you recommend specific strategies for not fearing wakefulness or YouTube videos where you addressed this? I want to say, if you check out any new video, check out the description, and there's a playlist called This is Natto. There's a specific video on befriending wakefulness, and like really, I think that's a great place to start. And other than that, I want to say that every single video, every single comment I answer, all of it is intended to make wakefulness less scary. Let's put it that way. Now, aside from the usual breathing, relaxation techniques, visualization, yoga nidra, body scan, noting, describing the physical sensations of anxiety until they subside, what are your recommendations for teaching our brains not to fear wakefulness? So yeah, you know, my thinking here becomes like when you hear of this, like all these things, visualization, yoga nidra, etc. You know, it's hard not to think that there may have been some effort involved here. And so what I mean by that, well, it is, if you think about teaching, it is sort of like it has no like emotional intent, if you will. So if you're teaching somebody how to read, it is very kind of like, okay, this letter says A, this is B, put them together, you get A, B, like that. The intent is just to learn, you know. But when the intent becomes to not feel a certain way, that becomes very tricky, because anything you do because you don't want to feel a certain way basically becomes a way of like trying not to hear the signals. And so the signals again are like anxiety and frustration, things like that. And when we're like, when the thought becomes like, how can I teach the brain that wakefulness is acceptable so I don't fear it? It's a little tricky. I think, you know, the sense I got from this question was that there is some desire to kind of like not be scared, if you will. And this is very tricky, because of course I want everyone here not to be scared, but when you're looking for a strategy to kind of prevent you from feeling scared, if you will, very tricky. So it's always like you know, being there with the fear, that really helps. And I mean, Esther here you know, mentioned, for example, like describing that's happening until it subsides. I think that's again quite tricky, because if you're doing something, if you're sort of like, okay, I feel scared right now. Now I'm going to describe how this fear feels so that it subsides, or until it subsides. Very tricky, because if you do it like, it's like, okay, I'm going to describe how it feels so it goes away, then you're trying to get away from it, which makes it stronger. And if you're just doing it until the fear subsides, there's this time component, time element there. You're like, oh, I've been describing this fear for like 5 minutes. It's still there. I got to go for 5 minutes more. It's still there. It's like when the intent is to escape something, very tricky, right? So, and so again, like describing a fear in itself, I think can be really helpful, or just saying like, aha, I'm scared, you know. But when we add a time component or a desire to escape to that, very tricky. So I think all those things, visualization, yoga nidra, great if done without any intent of being less scared or being calm. But if you do a body scan to become more calm, there's effort. If you do a breathing technique or relaxation technique to become more relaxed, there's effort, which is kind of like, I'm smiling a little bit, because like I think it's an inherent problem when you call something a relaxation technique, that so implies that it's supposed to make you more relaxed. And whenever you try to become more relaxed, you become more stressed, right? So really tricky, right? That one. So just a comment on this. There's a reason sleep deprivation is a form of torture. Yeah, it can be quite confusing. And I think, to me, this is like when you haven't slept much, then you can easily get ideas that you otherwise wouldn't, which, not only is it a form of torture, but it's usually used for like insects and things of that nature. When they want you to indoctrinate you, they kind of sleep deprive you, and then you're much more susceptible to get ideas you otherwise wouldn't, like these illogical ideas that I can think of any particular one, but that can definitely happen. I found that telling myself that I've survived days on little or no sleep isn't very comforting, nor is reminding myself that I can't lose my job, that my health won't suffer, etc. And I think, we have the same kind of thing going on here, that when you tell yourself that, when the intent with telling yourself that you're safe is that you want to not feel so scared, for example, then you probably feel more scared or uncomfortable or whatever it is. So like, just a lot of my clients go into kind of like use almost like mantras, saying like, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. When you feel scared, you're like, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. And I'm still scared. Okay, I got to keep going. I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. So just telling yourself that you're safe for the sake of feeling differently, it really leads to more struggle. So I think that those are the kind of the main points there, Esther. But let us know how that sounded, and please submit follow-up questions, of course. Adriana says, hello, why the disclaimer? I don't know which one, but my general disclaimer is always that if anyone is concerned about their health, then talk to your doctor, because that's kind of like, nothing here is a medical advice. So that's the disclaimer there. Okay, so I was thinking, like, maybe did I miss something there? Maybe the question from Adriana becomes like, I don't know what exactly it is, and you can tell me, Adriana, if you're still here. But if the disclaimer is like, one point can be like, if you, Daniel, say that being awake is not dangerous or not a threat, then why do you even need a disclaimer to say, like, talk to your doctor if you're scared? Well, this is because I don't know anything about anybody's circumstances. Maybe there's things that we don't know about. So I think it's always, again, when you're scared about anywhere about your health, then definitely talk to your doctor. So a little comment on that. So yeah, with that said, I want to thank everyone for sending questions, commenting, and being here. I think I have nothing to add. So yeah, with that said, I'll be back tomorrow, and until then, take it easy now.